Imagine this scene. A city of 3 million souls, completely cut off from the world for a staggering 872 days. Starved, frozen by brutal winters, and relentlessly bombed, yet against all odds it endures. The question that echoes through history is, how did Leningrad summon the strength to defy annihilation? Back in the summer of 1941, Leningrad still possessed an almost dreamlike quality. Its canals mirrored the soft, ethereal light. The sounds of children's laughter danced along the Neva River. Elderly couples sought solace on park benches, listening to faint, comforting chimes of distant church bells. The war felt like a distant threat, a dark cloud on the horizon, until its ominous shadow fell directly upon the city gates. September 8th, 1941, marked a turning point, a day etched in sorrow. The iron ring slammed shut. German and their allied forces severed vital rail lines and roads, isolating Leningrad completely. Escape became an impossibility. Supplies were cut off entirely. That very night, disaster struck as a major food warehouse was bombed, erupting in flames. A thick plume of black smoke ascended, a grim signal from the heavens. The agonizing grip of hunger had begun to tighten. Initially, a flicker of hope persisted. People clung to the belief that the hardship would be temporary. Ration lines formed, snaking through the city. Bread cards were issued and stamped, each person entitled to a meager daily portion, which dwindled smaller and smaller with each passing day. The winter of 1941 descended with unusual ferocity. Snow blanketed the grand boulevards, transforming them into desolate landscapes. Bitter winds whipped through the deserted streets. Coal supplies vanished, plunging the city into darkness. Power grids failed. Pipes froze solid. Citizens were forced to hack ice from the Neva River, carrying buckets of water home, each one feeling as heavy as stone. Bread became the ultimate currency, the very measure of existence. During the darkest hours, civilians were reduced to a mere 125 grams a day, a slice so thin it barely covered a child's palm. And even that wasn't true bread. It was a grotesque mixture of flour, husks, sawdust, and even paper dust. Yet, people guarded their precious morsels as if they were glowing embers, the last vestiges of hope. In a small apartment, a young girl named Tanya Savicheva lived with her family. They were an ordinary family, until the relentless hunger began to claim them, one by one. Tanya chronicled the tragedy in her diary. Jinya died, grandmother died, brother died, mother died, everyone died, only Tanya is left. Short, fragmented lines, carrying a weight heavier than any artillery barrage. That diary transcended its role as a child's journal. It became the collective voice of an entire city teetering on the brink. And yet, despite unimaginable suffering, Leningrad refused to yield. The people did not simply exist to survive. They lived to safeguard their home, their culture, their very identity. To the east lay a fragile thread of hope, Lake Ladoga, the only route not controlled by the enemy. When the lake was navigable, small boats risked the journey to bring in vital food supplies. German planes relentlessly hunted them from above. Many of these brave vessels never made it back. As winter deepened, Ladoga transformed into a vast, frozen wasteland, and across that treacherous ice emerged a road that existed on no map. The road of life. Old, battered trucks ventured onto a frozen expanse. The darkness offered shield against the bombs, but also brought a brutal cold, so intense that every breath crystallized into icy needles. The drivers kept their windows open, prepared to leap to safety if the ice gave way. They drove in absolute silence, the only sounds a crunch of tires on snow and the ominous groaning of the ice beneath them, like a wounded beast. Some days the ice shattered. Trucks plunged into the frigid depths, taking their precious cargo and brave drivers with them. But the very next night, another convoy would set out, because behind them lay a city on the verge of starvation. Ahead of them lay the precarious lifeline between life and death. Along this road, hundreds of thousands were evacuated, and a trickle of essential supplies managed to reach the city. It was never enough to satiate the hunger, but it was enough to prevent despair from completely consuming them. Within the besieged city, the seemingly useless were transformed into instruments of resistance. Factories continue to operate their workers, thin as shadows, standing at lathes, producing shells for the war effort. Hospitals lacked medicine, yet surgeons performed operations by the flickering light of oil lamps. Teachers held classes in bomb shelters, nurturing the minds of the next generation amidst the chaos. And perhaps most astonishingly, music refused to be silenced. In the summer of 1942, composer Dmitri Shostakovich completed his Symphony No. 7, Leningrad. The city orchestra had only a handful of surviving musicians, their ranks decimated by starvation and war. They rehearsed while battling extreme hunger, some collapsing from exhaustion during rehearsals. Yet on August 9, 1942, they performed the symphony in the Grand Hall. Loudspeakers were strategically positioned, directed toward the front lines, ensuring that even the besieging forces could hear the defiant strains of the music. Music couldn't fill empty stomachs, but it nourished their willpower, their unbreakable spirit. It broadcast a powerful message to the world. We are still alive, and we will not kneel. Time dragged on, an unending nightmare with no promise of dawn. In early 1943, Soviet forces managed to establish a narrow land corridor, providing a limited avenue for supplies. And finally, on January 27, 1944, the siege was broken. Leningrad had endured unimaginable losses. More than 1 million souls perished. But it did not fall, not because its people were devoid of fear, but because in the face of terror, they chose to stay, to share the last crust of bread, to drive trucks across the treacherous ice, to perform a symphony under the constant threat of bombs. So, when we reflect on the saga of Leningrad, the question isn't simply how did the city survive, but rather, what enduring values can human beings protect when everything else is stripped away? And what thoughts stirred in the minds of the German soldiers as Shostakovich's symphony rose from that starving city into the night? If this story stayed with you, please like and subscribe so you don't miss the battles that reshape history, because every follow keeps these human, painful, and true war stories alive on this channel.